Here's a hokey premise, okay? Recently dead people can come back to life.
Of the horror people, it was instantly a hit.
We wanted to do a real movie, but we didn't know what that real movie was. Most people feel that it was the kickoff of the whole zombie genre.
If we watch it with young audiences, you can hear a pin drop after a few minutes, and they're totally into it.
Whatever we did, we wanted to make it the best that we were capable of doing at the time. Back in the early 60s, the production company that George Romero and I started was called The Latent Image, Inc. And we started off small with TV commercials and short business films and that kind of thing. And people apparently liked what we were doing. So, and they actually paid us money to make films. And that's kind of how we cut our eye teeth on the business. And it became a pretty robust production company in the early 60s. There weren't a lot of commercial production companies, but we were one of them. And we kind of picked up this bohemian, oh, those guys, they'll do anything. So we got a lot of oddball kinds of requests. We got some really, really interesting ones.
The Calgon story. What happens when a Calgon research team and their submarine are reduced to micro size and sent on a dangerous mission deep inside a washing machine? The Calgonauts discover secrets of gray, dull-looking laundry.
It feels like
Leftover detergent film.
The fibers are covered with this stuff.
Oh, this box has never been opened.
I wouldn't have said it then, but I'll say it now. It was kind of on-the-job training. And so we got our P's and Q's together, and it turned out pretty well.
We did hundreds of commercial jobs, every kind of thing, educational films, political films, every kind of commercial, ketchup, pickles, soup, what you name it, we did it. Beer, lots of beer spots. After a year and a half of that, it was like a 10-year education from scratch, learning the film business from scratch and all the equipment and so on. And we were a very tight-knit production team. Me, Russ, Gary, George.
I got involved with Night of the Living Dead because of my brother Russ. He and George had formed a company called The Latent Image, and that was basically set up to do commercial or any kind of film work. We didn't know at that point in time. We were doing a lot of stills in the very beginning, and then the still work started branching out into other things, commercial work and sales training, all that sort of stuff. So that was it. That was the seed of it. That's what gave us the base to be able to have the equipment and to have all the, the manpower and everything in place to actually move ahead and do night.
And then we got a 35 millimeter camera. It was a blimp Aeroflex. And a blimp is an 80-pound cover for the camera, and its sole purpose is to seal in the sound of the camera so you don't have that grinding camera noise all your lip sync takes. And we're eating grilled provolone sandwiches and drinking beer in a bar around the corner from the studio, and George and I are bitching about our commercial clients who come to us when they have $5,000 or $6,000 to spend, and then they run off to New York or Hollywood when they have bigger money after and ignore all their promises, And I said, well, we have that camera now. We had all our own 16 millimeter editing, mixing, lighting. We had all the dubbing, and so I said we could. What if 10 of us kicked in $600 each, and we'd have $6,000? We could probably make a better horror film than these things they're showing on Chiller Theater late at night, and we could shoot 35. Black and white, work print down to 16 to do all the editing and everything, and then go from there. So George got all excited, pounded on the table, sent beer glasses flying. Everybody's staring at us. We're going to make a movie. We go back to the office and tell Russ about it, and right away he's in. Let me put together some figures. So he goes in his office for a couple hours and comes out later and says, well, I got bad news. We can't do it for $6,000. It's going to take more like $12,000. Oh, George went in the dumps. You know, George always reacted that way. You know, things would send him crashing. And I thought for a few minutes, I said, well, you know, the first 10 people, we had a pretty good idea who they'd be. I said, we're all going to work on the film or act in the film or whatever. And so, you know, everybody gets 6 shares for their $600. And how about the next 10 people who only get 2 shares for their $600? And that way we won't have to give away 100% of the movie.
Also important to say that you can't just raise $6,000 and go out and make a movie. I mean, we had equipment and know-how, and between us, between your equipment, our equipment, we had 2 separate companies. We didn't have to go rent stuff. We knew how to use the stuff. You guys did the makeup. I mean, half the staff, half the production credits are represented here now in these 4 people.
The company that owns Night of the Living Dead is called Image 10. There were 10 of us who set up the original framework, and we each put in $600. So we had $6,000 grub stake, plus we had all the equipment, lights, audio, cameras, that kind of thing. Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman doing audio production, so we had pretty good resources in terms of audio production. But $6,000 is what we started the film with. Then as we got a little bit of footage together, we started showing people and say, hey, would you like to throw in some more money? And by the time it was all said and done, we raised about $60,000. Back in 1967 is when we shot the film. $60,000 for a movie, even back then, was not very much money. It's much easier today, and with digital technology, to go out with a couple of cameras and shoot some exquisite pictures. In that time frame, it was moving equipment and lights it was much more of a chore, much bigger, much more cumbersome. $60,000 in hard cash. Then we had some deferments and so forth. By the time it was all said and done, we had about $114,000 into the production of the film. Hard cash, 60.
Initially, we wanted to make a movie.
Right.
And we backed into horror after we tried to talk to various people
We
about
didn't know
other things.
We didn't know anyone who had any horses, so that Western was
Western
out.
was out. No one listened whenever we would talk about something else.
You know, working on Night of the Living Dead wasn't any different than what I've been doing for years before. We were, as I said, a tight-knit group working together. So when we went on tonight, it wasn't like, you know, a whole new experience. These were the same guys that I had been working with for several years. So it was quite comfortable.
Here's a hokey premise, okay? Recently dead people can come back to life. Okay, pretty hokey. But if it happened, how would it happen? How would people react? How would media at the time handle it? How would there be interpersonal squabblings? We tried to do that as realistically as possible, and that's frankly where some of the documentary look of Night of the Living Dead came from.
George and I were the 2 writers in the group, so each of us had an editing room and each of us had a typewriter in the editing room, so we'd beat some ideas around and then we'd go to work in separate editing rooms and then we'd compare notes. So I said, whatever we do, if we're going to do a horror film, ought to start in a cemetery because people find cemeteries spooky. So then George comes back after, right around Christmas time. He went away for about 3 days and then he showed up with 20 or 30 pages of a story that started in a cemetery, and it was basically the beginning of what became Night of the Living Dead.
I think anybody who made a film called The Dead Next Door has got to be a fan of Night of the Living Dead. I mean, I'm too young to have seen it in the theater originally, but of course I knew of the film from television. Yes, absolutely a fan of Night of the Living Dead, and how can you not be? It's perhaps the best zombie movie of all time. Really owe everything that I've done since to The Dead Next Door. And when I was growing up, I did a lot of different things. I would shoot Super 8 short films, and I would make these little self-made magazines and things like that. And I wound up eventually doing all these things because I did The Dead Next Door. I published a magazine called Alternative Cinema for a number of years. I ran a mail order company. I had a distribution company. I wound up producing a film for John Russo, who was one of my childhood heroes, from Night of the Living Dead. Wound up having my first feature, The Dead Next Door, financed by Sam Raimi, and I just so many different things. I mean, I owe it all to The Dead Next Door, and ultimately by proxy to growing up with films like Night of the Living Dead.
I'm an enormous fan of Night of the Living Dead. It's one of the scariest films I've ever seen in my life. I remember the first time I saw it, I was still in grammar school. It was the first time it was ever aired on regular television. I was living in Rockaway Beach, New York at the time, and we had a tiny 10-inch black and white television, and I convinced my mother to stay up with me all night and watch this, and I think it aired at past midnight, and it scared the hell out of me.
And I said, George, this has all the right twists and turns and suspense, it's good, but who is this that's chasing this girl? And he said he didn't know. And I said, well, it seems to me they could be dead people. And I said, but you don't see what are they after? Whoever's attacking her, and the brother doesn't bite anybody, doesn't claw at them. What? Well, what? What's the deal? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, why don't we use my flesh-eating idea? So that's how they became dead people after human flesh. And without those two ideas, you have none of it. You don't have Walking Dead. You don't have anything that followed in what's now the modern zombie.
John Russo and George Romero worked on the script. We all kind of threw ideas into it, but the two of them were responsible for crafting it. John Russo then did the final draft of what became the shooting script.
We had total confidence in ourselves and in George Romero as the director, and George was our guy. I wasn't ready to direct back then. He almost gave the directorship to Carl Hardman one day, and I stopped that by just jumping in and saying, well, they were both kind of hedging, each one not wanting to say, well, I'll do it. And I jumped in and said, I'll direct, just to stop George from giving the directorship to Hardman. And when we left the meeting, on the way back, I said, George, I'm not ready to direct the thing, but if you don't direct it, people are going to lose faith in the project because you're our guy, everybody believes in you, and you have to do it.
We had equipment, we had the tenacity, were willing to go out there and spend all that time when we all had, or were trying to. I mean, you guys had a really going business at the time. We had one that we were trying to get going, and we all should have probably been back in town looking for the next client. But I think just that drive and desire, and just took it over the top. And
that
I think
energy,
plus the fact that we also I think did in the end wind up doing it pretty democratically. I mean, because initially you were going to direct, and then I wound up directing and all the stuff. I mean, we avoided big fights.
The actual production of Night of the Living Dead was really no different than any other production, whether it be TV commercial, whether it be documentary. I mean, obviously a narrative film is a little bit different than a documentary, but all of the same ingredients still have to come together. Whether you're doing a narrative piece and a feature film, or you're doing a documentary or a TV commercial, all of the basic elements are still in place. And that's what it was like. It was like working on a shoot, any film production shoot. All of the same job assignments, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. I will say that we had the I guess it was an advantage that we all wore different hats. George, I would have to say, he was the key workhorse. He was the principal photographer, cinematographer. Although I shot some, Jack Russo shot some. George was primarily responsible for the editing, but we all helped out just a little bit. There were certain sequences that I filmed.
The difficulties in Night of the Living Dead were no different than the difficulties of shooting any film. You know, only we didn't have any money, so we had to be extremely inventive. You know, we didn't have the luxury of special effects. We didn't have the luxury of anything. So it was just pure dedication. No one ever felt that it was drudgery at any moment.
Tom character was a 40-some-year-old cemetery caretaker hiding in the basement with the Cooper family. But then we decided we needed to have a young, sexy girl in the movie, so let's make him younger and give him a girlfriend. So that's what we did. And we didn't write much of it except Keith Wayne was flying in. We needed a scene to get some empathy going between Tom and Judy. And we were, you know, working 18, 20 hours a day, no sleep. 4 of us were staying at that farmhouse, which had no running water or anything. And so George and I are sitting under a grape arbor, and Keith's plane's going to land in a couple hours, and we don't have a scene. And I was so, you know, really tired, and nothing was coming to me. And I was so glad when George wrote the scene. He wrote the scene where we knew they'd be making Molotov cocktails, we knew that much, but we needed whatever the dialogue was going to be right there to gain empathy.
It's not like just a wind passing through. We've got to do something, and fast.
I just don't want you to go out there, that's all.
Hey, Smiley, where's that big smile for me?
So George wrote that scene, and I was so spaced out at that point. I thought it was actually good, and I was happy he did it. It's really kind of schmaltzy.
It was interesting that the cemetery scene in the film, which is where I, as Johnny, appear, along with Barbara and Bill Heinzman, the cemetery zombie. We were the first day of production. That's the very first thing that we filmed.
This was the famous Barbara shot where she's looking aside. This is the stone that Russ gets his head smacked on by the cemetery ghoul. And when you see this, that's the first start to see the cemetery ghoul. He's just walking back there and coming down this way.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
Well, I was going to be the cemetery zombie only because there was nobody around to do it. And so I got into that makeup in the cemetery, and Hardman helped me with it. We were kind of inventing what these zombies would be, you know. And so I figured, well, they'd have a certain amount of rigor mortis, and so I would just twist my face out of shape to the point where I'd get headaches when we were shooting. But also I wanted some weird little thing different, so I got some vampire teeth, just those plastic teeth, and I cut the fangs off. And I had those aren't my teeth, you know, they're plastic teeth with the fangs cut off. So I get into makeup, and there are a few shots of us filming there, but I'm not in those shots because I'm getting into makeup. Then Heinzman showed up with a black suit, and I said, good, you be the zombie, I'll keep loading magazines. So later I got back into that makeup, and I was the zombie that got the tire iron in the head. So the two featured zombies ended up being me and Heinzman. Well, Dwayne was excellent. Can't argue with Dwayne. He's the best actor in the movie. And he's a naturalistic actor. Acting back then was a lot of posturing. It wasn't so naturalistic back then, but the style of it fit right in with what was being done. You know, Hardman's style. At one point he asked George, do you think I'm I'm too big, George, playing it too big. I thought he was, but I wasn't the director. And George said, no, it's fine. You know, it's over the top. But the movie rises above its flaws. You know, whatever flaws it has, obviously, it totally rose above them, and it just hit people so hard. And it still does. Like, if we watch it with young audiences, you can hear a pin drop after a few minutes, and they're totally into it.
I was able to separate my roles as producer, actor, without any difficulty at all. My actual on-set filming assignments, I think, were probably 4 days. 2 cemetery days, and then other Johnny, well, when Johnny comes back, obviously. I think I had 4 days maximum, out of a total of 30 days.
It took 6 weeks approximately to shoot Night of the Living Dead, divided up into two distinct sections in the fall, or in the spring and then in the fall.
I was actually on set for Night of the Living Dead, either as an actor or as a producer. I would probably say 95% of the time, because when I wasn't working on Night of the Living Dead, I was back at Latent Image, taking care of our commercial customers, because they were pretty patient with us, actually. You know, hey, we're working on a movie. We're working on a real movie, but we don't want to neglect your beer commercial. But so I was kind of the guy that kept the office running. So, but I was at set probably 95% of the time.
I wrote it as a little boy named Timmy, and Carl said my daughter can do that, and so she did, and she only has one line, I heard, you know. About a year ago, we were on stage doing a Q&A, and I, for the first time I heard her, she talked about what it was like playing that part. Well, the farmhouse had no basement, so I set up the basement with sawhorses with a door. That's going to be the little girl lying on that. And then Cara talked about what it was like lying on that hard door for hours while the scene was being shot.
A thing that sort of evolved, and it got harder and harder and heavier and heavier. We did initially say we're going to go a little further than these other movies go. But then we kept watching dailies and realized maybe we could go another inch, maybe we could go another inch. In the end, the last shoot that we went out and did was almost specifically we were filling some plot points too, but we went out specifically to get a few more graphic shots. I mean, you look at the film now and it looks really tame.
When we started out to do Night of the Living Dead, or I think it applies to probably any production, what are the headaches? What are the hazards? I think universally, all filmmakers would agree is raising the money is the tough part. There are many, many good ideas, many, many skillful people to help you put your film together. Raising the money is still one of the tough parts. And I don't think that that's probably ever going to change. But that was, in terms of the biggest obstacle that we had to overcome. It would have been raising the funds to actually do the movie and not just get it started, but actually complete it. That is something that our group had a great deal of tenacity about. I mean, once we got the scent, the feeling of the first couple of days of shooting under our belt, I mean, it was like a freight train. Nothing was going to stop us from finishing that film, nothing. Day by day, page by page in the script, we were just trying to do the best job we were capable of doing. And once we put it all together, we thought, hey, this is kind of interesting. There's a little bit of something here. But how audiences would react to it, we had no idea. We were thinking at the time. In that time frame, there were many, many, many neighborhood theaters scattered throughout the country, and there were many, many, many drive-in theaters. And we figured if we can get 2 years out of the neighborhood and drive-in circuit, we'll be doing pretty good. And it's impossible to have predicted that, almost 50 years later, we're still talking about this film, and there's a high level of interest in the film.
Probably the overall great experience about working on Night of the Living Dead was the camaraderie, was the one mission and one mission only. There were no egos involved. Everybody was equal. And everybody pitched in. There were only like 5 of us that were the main, key crew people. So, and as I said, we had the benefit of having worked together for all those years prior to that. So we knew how to cover one another. Everybody would load magazines. Everyone would, move grip stands. It wasn't like, that's his department, don't touch that. So that was quite refreshing, actually. That was, I think to me, that's one of the major reasons to do an independent film is you're generally speaking, you're doing it for yourself with the people you like to be with.
Really, the way it happened was tenacity. I mean, we were going to get that movie made some
One
damn
way
way
or
or
another,
another.
whatever it
And I
takes,
think it was really at the core of the group, not all 10, but at least 7 or 8 of us were
determined
to make the movie.
What we didn't have in money, we made up in resourcefulness. So we figured, okay, we need, since this is news coverage, it's this, it's that, we need a helicopter shot of the posse lined up in the field. They're, tromping through looking for ghouls. So I persuaded KQV, a local radio station here at the time, that had a news helicopter, traffic helicopter. Hey, how about this? And they went for it. So they sent their helicopter out to our set. George wanted no parts of getting in a helicopter and shooting any footage from a helicopter. He said, no, you do it. So I ended up climbing in with that was with a handheld camera, but hanging out of the side of a news helicopter to shoot those aerial shots.
Something about those films just clicked with me. Growing up, I was more of a science fiction fan, and I remember seeing the first pictures of Dawn of the Dead and Fangoria #1, and seeing that these bloody heads blowing off and machetes and heads, and something that just triggered inside me. I was like, wow, I want to. This is what I want to do. I want to make something like this. So then all of a sudden, all of my Super 8 short films were me running around seeing how I can fake kill all the neighbor kids and cats and dogs and whatever I could get my hands on. So it was very influential. All of that entire series of movies, and of course seeing Night of the Living Dead first on television, you're in the comfort of your own home, but seeing how it has the impact to scare you, even when you're in the relative safety of your own home, was a different experience from the people who first saw it in the theater. My parents saw it at the drive-in or whatever, but it was all those movies are very influential to me personally.
Zombie Hunter City of the Dead was the very first broadcast zombie-based TV series in history. For an indie guy like myself that was always interested in making horror films, that series of films, especially the first one, you can't calculate how important that is. Everything changed after that point. When that was first shown in 1968, horror films changed forever. Every single type of them has been influenced, I believe, by those. Zombies actually still scare me. When I think about making horror films, I think about those kinds of monsters. Zombies always have stayed with me. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but I think it was the care that was given to the first film that really brought all the characters to life, brought the monsters to life, and for me, almost 40 years later, after originally seeing it, they're in my head every day.
My first feature film, The Dead Next Door, was about zombies, mainly because that's what I was really into as a teenager. I liked all kinds of horror movies, of course, and all kinds of splatter movies in particular, but something about the zombies just, I don't know if it's because it's scarier, the fact that it's people, that are doing the killing and not some faceless monster or an alien or whatever else. I think something about that just sort of stuck with me. And even from I think 1978 or 1979, when I started making Super 8 short films, one of the first ones I did was something called The Flesh Eater, which is basically like this zombie climbing out of this coffin and running around killing the kids in the neighborhood. There's no plot, of any kind. It's only 3 minutes long or whatever, but it was sort of just a way to emulate what I was seeing, in the pages of Fangoria and watching these movies at the theater, because there was no home video at that point. But I just think something about the zombies in particular, having watched so much of that stuff growing up, I wanted to do my own take on it, but do it in a way that was, a lot of the movies that came after Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead were just complete knockoffs, rip-offs. They would, take whole plot elements. I was trying to do something slightly different with it and take it in a little bit different direction that was sort of faithful to what the Romero films were, but kind of stood on its own.
Professor, you feel that there is a definite connection between
definite connection as far as Dr. Keller and myself.
Doctor, please. I thought
that also happened in the Washington, D.C. Sequence. I shot the bulk of that because George was in those shots. A lot of people don't know that George Romero plays the part of a reporter in that. I shot those scenes, and I shot the much of the newscast thing that's, where Chuck Craig is talking about as the phenomenon is revealing itself.
Yeah, part of the inspiration to shoot part of the Dead Next Door in Washington, D.C. certainly harkens back to Night of the Living Dead. I remember them, reading in Jack Russo's Night of the Living Dead film book that they went down there and basically did the same, they did it guerrilla style. They didn't get permits. They just went down there and shot this little, just looked like a TV, newscast scene down there. So that certainly stuck in my head when it came time to do the Dead Next Door and to do something else. Because obviously anything related to government, you got to shoot it. DC is the place to go to frame it. So it was important for me, I guess, to have lend some legitimacy to it, I guess, by having scenes. And of course, I was trying to up it significantly by having zombies on the White House fence, which was a bold adventure.
I had heard about a movie being filmed here, and it was interesting to me as a child, a movie, and here, I always thought movies were in a magical, Hollywood environment. So I was intrigued, but too young to see the movie for several years. But it always was there. It was always like, wow, they filmed a movie here. I was really into movies and that type of thing as a child, and monsters and such. So, and then there was a late night horror host show in Pittsburgh called Chiller Theater, a very famous horror host show that Bill Cardille, who was in The Night of the Living Dead, also was the host of the show, talked about it and eventually showed it on the show. That's where I first saw Night of the Living Dead. And it was all set from there. I was into that, whatever those were. They weren't called zombies at the time, but I was into the concept from there. I was hooked. And I followed the progression of zombies, and just in my head or in my own personal hobbies or whatever, things I liked, I always noticed different types of things that were like those Romero ghouls, zombies that were in Night of the Living Dead. And so over the years, I just became more and more involved with that type of thing. I went to conventions. I started having annual Halloween parties that were Night of the Living Dead themed, and then it just sort of became my thing. And then eventually, as a business owner in Pittsburgh, I thought, well, someone should do this. So I worked it into my business model, and here we are today.
As far as the recent mainstream appeal of zombies, I couldn't be more for it. I think they always should have been as popular as they are today. I think that people identify with them. I think people love dressing up as them. I think that zombies have invaded almost every kind of media. You'll see it in almost every kind of show and commercials and print. And people just love the idea that maybe they can come back as some kind of monster and it would still be them. So I'm all for the boom in the media for them. I think that it should go on forever. What's most appealing about zombies for me is that they're the monster of all the classic monsters that could probably happen. You're not really going to be chased down by a mummy. Godzilla's not really going to come and get you. But given bioscience and genetic engineering today and the advances in technology, zombies might actually happen. If any of the monsters are going to happen, those are the ones that are going to come.
We didn't think we were going to rule the world, and we didn't know if we could even get the movie sold. We knew one thing, that we were making a good movie. We had total confidence in that. And then when we started to get the rushes back and some of the editing, which George did the cutting on it, I remember Carl Hardman said, well, I think we have a movie here. Well, we already knew it, you know, those of us who were filmmakers. But we didn't know the distribution business, and we didn't know if we could get it sold, and we talked about if we had to hand carry it from one theater to another, then that's what we would do. And so then it was decided, George and Russ being the ones that started the company when I went into the Army, and they were the honchos there, that they deserved to be the ones to go to New York with the answer print. Well, they're driving to New York and Martin Luther King is shot, and they have a movie, 5 cans of 35 millimeter in the trunk of a Corvair, and the cities are in flames. And here they have a movie where a black guy gets killed by a sheriff who wasn't a redneck, no way, he was just a guy doing his job, but could be interpreted as a white redneck that shot a black guy. And they didn't, are we going to be able to sell our film? And they went from one screening to another, and it looked like Columbia was going to buy it. And they didn't. They had the majors would have, if they were interested in buying something, the next thing they'd bring all their heads of foreign distribution, heads of television sales, heads of whatever, all the different divisions, and get their opinions. And then apparently the only reason they didn't take it is because everything was going color. Color would have cost 3 times more for the film stock processing and so on. And so we shot black and white, which little did we know, I mean, black and white movies a lot of the movies we saw were black and white. We didn't know that this whole thing with the drive-ins and the long throw was going to come into play. The drive-ins were a pretty big market, and they liked to have pictures in color because with the long throw and the big screen and drive-ins with color, they could start the program while it was still dusk. It didn't have to be totally darkness.
On October 3rd, after the public opening, I got a call from George Stern, and he said, my boy, he said, I don't know what's up with this film. He said, but we are getting really great responses to it. So Associated Theaters continued to play the film, and it was playing off beautifully. George Stern made a point of, he might have been as responsible as anybody about the early kickstart of Night of the Living Dead, because what he did, he got on the phone and he called his exhibition pals, his theater owner pals in Dayton and Cleveland and Philadelphia and Cincinnati and say, I don't know what's going on with this picture, but we just ran an ad in the newspaper apologizing because we've had to turn so many people away from drive-ins. And they did. They ran an ad apologizing. We're sorry if you couldn't see Night of the Living Dead, come back. We'll give you, half price, whatever. As that word got out in the exhibition business, the job of the distributor then pretty much became answering the phone and taking play dates. So it got a good jump start. Then it petered off a little bit, not completely, but it petered off a little bit. And then it became popular outside the U.S. as well. It started to, when the Walter Reed organization, Continental Pictures, they were the original distributor of the picture. Their salespeople got out and they started working the territories pretty well. And so the play dates were very, very, they were voluminous. So it it got a head of steam early on, and that head of steam didn't die off too quickly.
Well, we called it Night of the Flesh Eaters, and then we got a letter from some attorneys who said there was a film called Flesh Eaters. Really, I don't think there was any copyright on that. I think we could have just left that title alone, but we didn't know. We didn't want the hassle, so we changed it. George came up with Night of Anubis. Anubis is the Egyptian god of death, and it was too esoteric. And I think I was the one that came up with Night of the Living Dead in a meeting with the distributor once they bought it. But Jerry Pickman took credit for that. They had a Continental Pictures branch of Walter Reed. I'm almost 100% sure it wasn't him, it was me.
The first time I saw Night of the Living Dead was on the big screen was at the premiere. We didn't do any kind of test screenings or anything else. I mean, first time I saw it with a huge audience. We had obviously shown it to friends and family and things like that, but the first time I actually saw Night of the Living Dead was at the premiere, and as a 16-year-old, 17, well, what was I by that time? I guess I was 19. You know, as a 19-year-old, Klieg lights and limousines and red carpets and and just, of course, these are a hand-picked group of people that, you know, were in the, you know, in the film, in the making of it, helping support us, you know, clients of ours. So it was outrageous. I mean, they just went nuts.
We had our glorious premiere for Night of the Living Dead here in Pittsburgh at the Fulton Theater. And it was the first time that we had seen the film with the new title on it.
There was a copyright on the print that was taken to New York, and then when the distributor was supposed to burn the copyright in when they put their logo and the title change in, and they didn't. And they said they put tags, copyright tags on those 17 prints, but the prints were gone out to the theaters. So under the law, we shouldn't have lost our copyright because we had a copyright.
When the title change occurred and Night of the Living Dead was officially put on it, that work was all done by the distributor.
We had no control over it. Once it went to Walter Reed and it was their lab, we didn't even have any authorization to deal with their lab. So we couldn't even supervise the title change and the copyright notice that they fucked up.
Back in those days, under the old copyright law, it's no longer the law, but under the copyright law then, if you put something out for public exhibition without a copyright on it, you lost your copyright. And that was the position that the Copyright Office took. And we have battled that caveat, and the question still is not answered. If the Copyright Office says it's public domain, we have never said it's public domain, ever.
It was just unfortunate. It was unfortunate that everyone in the world knows who did the movie. There's no question about that. There's no issues of anything like that. But that it opened it up to huge amounts of piracy, and I don't care about that. I don't think anybody's, you know, becoming a millionaire off of, you know, bootleg Night of the Living Dead T-shirts, but it's just it's the image. This is a classic film of, you know, 100 best in American history, you know, and not to have it clean was kind of a drag.
Since that time, the copyright laws have changed. Night of the Living Dead may have been one of the reasons why the copyright law was changed, because when this inadvertent act happened, we were the innocent bystanders. But it's created, you know, years and years and years of headaches for us.
Everything with Night of the Living Dead, it's in one way, it's like a millstone around our necks, and by our, I mean me and Russ, because we're the two trustees of the company. We've been with this from the beginning, and every single day there's something we have to deal with concerning Night of the Living Dead, and a lot of it is gut-wrenching stuff because somebody's pirating it, somebody's taking credit for things, somebody I'd say, if you have any talent, make your own goddamn movie and leave us alone, will you? I don't object if somebody does something original, more power to them. You know, if you can come up with a way to put ghouls or zombies in your movie and it works and it's something new and unique, great. But don't go making your own Night of the Living Dead or using our characters or our ideas, because you're an asshole if you do that.
Here's one thing that has never been in question. No one, not one single person anywhere in the world have said, hey, those guys in Pittsburgh, they didn't do Night of the Living Dead. I did Night of the Living Dead. That has never been an issue, ever. No one has claimed authorship. I think pretty much the whole world knows where Night of the Living Dead came from. So, and that's never been an issue with the Copyright Office. But we still have some issues to work out with them, and the matter has not, it's not a closed matter by any stretch of the imagination. We are still working diligently to recover that copyright, because we and many people who know the story believe that the film is rightfully ours, and we rightfully ought to have a copyright on it.
So we had affidavits and all that kind of thing, and we're still fighting that battle. It's ridiculous. I sent them a letter. I said, who do you want? Who is the Copyright Office supposed to protect? The thieves and pirates, or these 30 people that put their sweat and blood into this movie? Poor people that had no money. Well, apparently they want to protect the thieves and the pirates.
Is it possibly good that the copyright was handled the way it was? Did that change, pop culture? Did that actually change the landscape of movie monsters because of that, or would it have happened anyway? And without a time machine or something, there's just no way to know. But it happened, and you can definitely point to the fact that it was public domain that caused a lot of people to see it that wouldn't have otherwise.
Putting your heart and soul and all your money and your entire investment into a project, to have it taken from you just because of one line of text that happened to be taken off of one distributor's reel, that's horrifying to us. I know that is something that has stayed with the original producers of the film and the cast members since then. I think that it was, I don't know for sure, but I think it was one of the examples used for changes in copyright law today. Now that independent filmmakers are protected so much with the work they create at the moment they're creating it, that wasn't always the case. And I think that through their hardship of this, it helped bring about a much needed change in how artists are protected today.
On one hand, it's extremely unfortunate that all the filmmakers put all this effort into their homegrown film, and it became such an important movie, and yet they weren't able over the years to reap all the proper benefits from it. They reaped some, but not monetarily. But then the flip side of that, there's an ongoing debate or discussion of what would have happened in the history of that film and zombies in general had there been proper copywriting. Would the movie had developed as much exposure from repeated viewings on TV, because a lot of TV stations and places take advantage of public domain films and play them more often than copyrighted films. So could it have been that the overexposure of a film that is A, a good film, and B, in public domain, allowed more people to see repeatedly a really good film, as opposed to some other really bad film that was in the public domain? Because most public domain films were abandoned on purpose. They just were like, oh, this isn't a good film, we don't care, and they gave up. They didn't pay the fees or whatever. So it's very rare that a really important good film ends up in the public domain.
What happened with the copyright issue on Night of the Living Dead is probably easily comes to mind as one of the worst crimes of in cinematic history. That the fact that they basically lost the copyright to the movie due to a mistake, and it's it could happen to anybody. because most filmmakers don't, a lot of filmmakers don't even think to register their movie with the Library of Congress, let alone put that copyright notice at the end. And we live in a day and age now where there's so little regard for copyright, that people, the minute a movie comes out on home video, people are ripping it and throwing it up on, any number of torrent sites or anything else. I mean, there's just no, there's a whole generation now of kids that just have no regard for copyright. At least, what makes it worse back then is there was no home video. There was none of that stuff. It was just in the theaters, But of course, when the home video came along and all these companies realized there's no copyright on this movie, we can just do whatever we want willy-nilly, is a travesty now, because it's not only for the fans, it's terrible because you have a million different versions of the movie struck from, who knows how many different copies, and which is the best one? No one knows. It's like you almost have to collect them all just to see what is the best version.
Well, I think it's incredibly unfortunate what happened to the Night of the Living Dead crew in the past in terms of their copyright and trademark. I did hear recently that they're going to be getting the rights to that trademark back. And it may have taken a long, long time. But it just shows that if you are diligent with something and you believe in something and you try, then maybe you can recover something that you lost, or in this case, everything that they got back. I hope that works out for them. I think it would be wonderful. I think the fans would be thrilled to hear that they finally got some kind of control over the creation that they made. And I think that's that's a ray of hope for all of us who have wind up in similar situations. The very worst thing is, it's a combination of things. Either people not believing it happened, or once you do have people who believe in you and believe that it happened and get legal representation, the other side is just far too strong for you to fight. It's an injustice. I don't know how to fix it. I have been a victim of it. I don't know how to go forward from that, other than say, you have to go forward from that. You have to keep creating. You can't let it break you. If something comes in your way, a mountain you can't pass, go around it. Go to the next mountain. Maybe you can climb that one. Allowing someone who steals from you to break you, you let them win. And a creative person is always going to want that outlet, and they're always going to find a way to have that outlet come out. You just can't let it break your heart. You can't let it break your spirit.
Who knows what the copyright issue really did for its popularity? A lot of people say, well, if it wasn't for the fact that it went into public domain, it wouldn't have been as popular. Well, I disagree with that. I really think that it was on the road to being every bit as popular by, the audience reaction. So I guess you could say, anything that can help you have your name out there is a help, but certainly not at the expense of not having it copywritten. One of the things that I feel cheated about most is that I never got to be a fan of the movie. You make a movie, you know everything, you know every frame of it. I was the sound man, I was the assistant cameraman. Where's the surprise? So all you guys got to actually experience the film for what it is, and I never got to do that.
The fact that the Library of Congress says it's in public domain has given millions and millions and millions of people the opportunity to see the film. So that has inured to our benefit, I think. It hasn't necessarily translated into dollars, but it has certainly translated into the prestige and esteem of the film. I mean, it's hard to go anywhere that people haven't at least heard of Night of the Living Dead. And I think because so many people have seen it, so that was kind of unintended consequences of something goes into the public domain. In our case, it just made it available to a much wider audience, and I think that's probably been good.
As far as the copyright, the mess with the copyright causing more pirated copies of Night of the Living Dead to get out there in every format, I guess it does spread it around more, but it would have got spread anyway because it's such a good film. I mean, I don't care what format it comes in. I mean, we get deals and offers, so the legitimate distribution would have still happened. People think that the whole phenomenon and the interest in these flesh-hungry zombies only started lately, but that's not true. It just never quit. You know, the film touched a raw nerve in people. We've been prey for wild beasts. We had to worry about being devoured going way back in evolutionary history and so on. And so there's some atavistic fear of that, the fear of being devoured. And when we kind of combined the vampire, I wasn't thinking of it that way, but combining the vampire myth and the zombie myth, then that did the trick, you know, because zombies weren't very frightening until we made them flesh eaters. But it never quit because we did Return of the Living Dead. George did Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, and he's still doing Diary of the Dead and Island of the Dead and now Empire of the Dead and whatever. And Sam Raimi jumped right in. Well, those guys wanted to make comedies, but they saw Night of the Living Dead and they said, we should make something like that. So they did The Evil Dead, and then that took off and became a franchise. And then you had 28 Days Later, and you know, all that. It just never stopped. And then the Walking Dead people, I met them years ago when they were doing those comic books.
And so this issue of copyright with the Copyright Office, as far as we're concerned, is still an open issue. But there are other remedies that are available to us, and those are some of the things that that we continue to explore. So as an intellectual property, there is no way that we have given up on, we've not sacrificed our ownership of Night of the Living Dead at all.
I will say I have not seen a single episode of The Walking Dead. It's not, you know, it's not for any specific reason other than I don't have time to get absorbed in another TV show. Everybody tells me how great it is, so I feel like I'm probably missing out on something, and I probably should be watching it. But to me, it's like, you know, I go back to Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and sort of anything that came after that isn't as relevant to me, I suppose. Those are my core zombie experience. I mean, I like some of the other films, Return of the Living Dead. I like, you know, Zombie, Lucio Fulci's Zombie. I mean, I like a lot of those movies, but it seems like every time you turn around now, it's zombie this, zombie that. It's almost sort of like too much, I guess.
I am a zombie purist, and we try to do a combination of them. One of our zombie hunters has her doctorate in biochemistry, and she said, I'll be in part of this if you guys do medically accurate zombies. And we try to figure out what is a medically accurate zombie. And she said, well, when they first turn, they'll be moving quickly. When rigor mortis sets in, they'll be moving slowly. So we have attempted to show a fresh zombie being able to move fast as they would in normal life, but a couple hours later, they're slow and shambling, and I think that's the way they should be. Underestimating slow zombies is definitely how they come and get you. They don't really work as a pack, but they kind of default to a pack. If there are 3 or 4 of them and you could evade, that's fine. It's the 1,000 and the 10,000 behind them, depending on how bad it's spread, that's your real problem. Just the sheer weight of them. You're in a lot of trouble.
I am not entirely a zombie purist. I am in the sense that I want everyone to understand what is a zombie purist, but I'm open-minded to all takes on the concept. I don't want everything to be the same for, you know, every idea, every film, every concept to be, let's just make Night of the Living Dead over and over again. So no, in that sense, I want the recognition in what a purist zombie is to be known, but I welcome all, you know, interpretations of that and you know, leaps forward, you know, just different things, different ideas. Some are good, some are bad. You know, I want to see them all, and I want to pick out the good ones. So, yeah, in that sense, I don't have a problem with fast zombies if the film is right for them. I don't have a problem with cute cartoon zombies. I don't have a problem with brain-eating zombies that some people say, well, zombies aren't supposed to just eat brains, they eat flesh or whatever you want to do with them. If it's good, I like it.
As far as a legacy is concerned, we wanted to make one good movie and pay off the horror fans. We knew we were making a good movie, but nobody could predict that it would, you know, nobody has a crystal ball that would become what it's become. I didn't, of course, know that.
When I delivered the famous Johnny line, "They're coming to get you, Barbara," it was kind of a half-baked Boris Karloff kind of, I don't know where I was going with it, but to me, Night of the Living Dead, setting aside the fact that I played one of the characters, setting aside the fact that I was a producer on the film, Night of the Living Dead to me as a story is a story that right from the opening frame of the film starts to take things away from the audience. You know, as soon as you see the opening road in Evans City and the tiny little car getting bigger and bigger, this is not a comedy. There's not probably going to be too many laughs here, hopefully not. But then you don't expect that 7 or 8 or 9 minutes into the film that one of the people that you've been conditioned, one of the characters you've been conditioned to expect to be with for a while, boom, gets knocked off. Whoa, what's that all about? And this stumbling old character in a cemetery, what's up with that? And Barbara then having to escape, from him. And then from the cemetery scene on down, it just keeps taking elements away from you. And you think, well, how much more can go?
Because it truly was one of the first films where the good guys didn't survive. Up to that point in time, if you had a white hat on, no matter what chased you, no matter how horrible the situation, you always ended up alive with that white hat on. In Night of the Living Dead, didn't work out that way. The good people you were hoping would survive. You always thought, they're gonna make it. At least Ben's gonna make it. Didn't. That, I believe, was the profound effect the movie had. It helped change the way horror films were made.
The picture that sells the most copies is me with in that makeup in the cemetery, and I have a white shirt. So when they say, "Did you know the picture was going to go on for 50 years?" I said, "Yeah, why do you think I wear that white shirt?" It gives me a perfect place to sign.
It is, to me, stunning how many fans there are of Night of the Living Dead. And somebody said to me, a close friend said, "Well, doesn't that get to be a bit of a drag? You know, you go to a convention and you meet hundreds and hundreds of fans a weekend." I don't find it that way at all. Being in touch with those fans helps me to keep my feet on the ground. And also there's a reality when you see the sincerity of those folks that they want to talk to you even for a couple of minutes, and to them, it's a significant deal. And guess what? For me, it has become a significant deal because throughout everything, there is not much that separates me from them. If it were not for Night of the Living Dead, I would be at home on the weekend doing yard work, But here, I have the ability to get out and see people, shake hands with them, make them happy for 10 minutes that they're getting to meet Johnny. People say, "Well, don't you get sick of saying the line, No, actually, it's because for them, it's an absolute reward. Oh, say the line, say the line, say the line, And hey, why not? It's just, for me, meeting these people, these fans who have been so supportive, that's a big payoff for me. I mean, a truly, sincerely big payoff.